What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Marky360 here, back with another video. And today I'm going to be doing a collection update video, but I also wanted to talk about rare video games. So we're going to be doing a collection update and showing off the new games that I got in my collection. But I wanted to do a quick chat on rare games because normally when you think of rare video games, you think of games from generations past, right? From older consoles like PS2, original Xbox, PS1, stuff like that. Games that were, I don't know, maybe niche and didn't sell as many copies, so there's less copies out there. So when you do come across a copy, it's much more expensive. You have games like the Silent Hill games, for instance, right? I've got Silent Hill 2 or Silent Hill 3 here. Silent Hill 3 and Silent Hill Origins, both these games will go over $100. They're much more expensive. So they're harder to come by, which makes them a lot more expensive to get. So if you want to add them to your collection, they're a lot more expensive. But oftentimes, they end up being worth more in your collection if you can get them for a deal or whatever. So yeah, there's also other examples of rare games would be like games from the Xbox 360 generation that come like a Game of the Year version that come fully complete with DLC that may no longer be available to download. Perfect example of that would be I have here a copy of Marvel Ultimate Alliance Gold Edition. So this version of the game comes with DLC characters which were delisted from the Xbox 360 store. Now the 360 store doesn't even exist anymore, but initially when it did exist, the characters were delisted, so you could no longer access the characters. Even if you have already downloaded the characters, say if you owned the game previously and you paid for the characters and you downloaded them, unless you still had them on your system, they would not be there for you to re-download. You cannot re-download the characters. This is a common misconception when it comes to digital games. A lot of people think that if you purchase a game, it's in your library, and that means that you own it forever, and you don't have to worry about not being able to re-download it. This is not true. And the console manufacturers, both Sony and Microsoft, they tell you this in their terms of service. They can and do regularly delist games, and it is at their discretion, and they don't have to notify you. So you can't, even games that you've paid for and you've had in your collection, they can go into your library and delist the game if they lose the license or whatever. And especially when it comes to licensed games like Marvel, those are really, the licenses on those are really difficult. So for instance, someone right now who may own a copy of Marvel Spider-Man PS4, if you own that digitally, I can guarantee you at some point in time, Sony's going to lose the rights to Marvel Spider-Man. They're not going to have that sometime in the future, and that game will be delisted from your library. So if you own it digitally, it's a ticking time bomb. It won't be there forever. So that's the case with this game. The DLC characters for this game were delisted, and you can't access those characters anymore digitally. So the only way to access them, they were printed on disc on this version of the game. It's the gold edition of the game. So with this version of the game, the characters are printed on disc, and you can still access those characters and still use them on an Xbox 360 today. But yeah, so that's generally what you think of when you think of rare games. You think of games from past generations, older games. But we're seeing a lot more nowadays where even on the current generation, you can come across games that are very rare and in limited quantities physically, because unfortunately not a lot of games are being manufactured physically today. There is definitely a shortage on physical copies for certain video games. So one of the games that I have here today that I'm adding to the collection is an example of that. It would be High on Life for the Xbox Series X. So this is an FPS game that came out, I think it was in 2022. It initially launched as a digital-only title on Xbox Game Pass, and it's a really quirky, funny FPS game. It's made by Squanch Games, which, if you don't know, that's the studio that was founded by Justin Roiland, who is the creator of the what is that series? The Rick and Morty series. So yeah, he created the Rick and Morty series. His studio made this game, and it has humor that's very on par and similar with the Rick and Morty series. A lot of the voice actors from that series also make an appearance in this game with Justin Roiland himself, and it's just a really funny, quirky game. You would have to like that style of humor in order for you to enjoy this game. Otherwise, you might find it kind of grating, but it's also a really fun shooter. But unfortunately, this game didn't get a really wide release physically. So, like I said, it initially launched on Xbox Game Pass, and it was an Xbox exclusive for a while. Then it got a multi-platform launch to PS5, and they also later launched physical copies with limited run games. So as you can see here, the limited run logo right here on the case. So limited run games, they have their own website, and they do physical copies for different publishers that don't plan on doing their own physical release, but they're very limited, not that many copies. And honestly, if you don't pre-order a copy, you're pretty much SOL, because you're probably not going to get one. It's going to completely sell out, and then that'll be it. So this one regularly goes for about $180 to $200 online. There's also another collector's edition which you regularly see for $280. This one I was lucky enough to snag for $85 on Mercari, but it is oftentimes a much more expensive game, and it's not something you expect in the current generation. You don't expect to see games in the current generation that are that expensive, but unfortunately that's just the kind of ecosystem we're living in now because of physical copies being so rare. So another game that I have on the list that is also a pretty rare one to find is Lollipop Chainsaw Repop. So this game here is a remake of a game that originally launched in 2011. It is a Suda51 game, if you know that developer. His studio Grasshopper Manufacturer originally launched this game in 2011 on the Xbox 360. It's an action game in which you play as a cheerleader who hunts zombies, and it is very, very funny. It's a silly game. It's kind of like a spoof on Buffy, but instead of being a vampire slayer, she's a zombie slayer. But yeah, she has a chainsaw, and it's just a really quirky kind of fun game. It's got pretty good gameplay. Not the best game, but it's still pretty good. I also have the original version here for the Xbox 360. This launched back in 2011, but yeah, unfortunately, this game is a harder one to come by. It's not one that you see very often, so it's more expensive, and it was also launched, but the physical copies were also done by Limited Run Games. So because this game initially launched only digitally and only have a few physical copies, it's really, really hard to come by. So I see this one online for about $80 to $100. Maybe you can get it for a little less. I got this one for $65 on Mercari. But yeah, this one's also a much more expensive game. It's also specifically the Xbox Series X version was much harder to come by than the PS5 or Switch versions. Those you see for like $49, $30-ish, somewhere around in there. But getting it on the Series X is much more difficult. At one point, I couldn't find a Series X copy at all, but then I just so happened to run across a Series X copy on Mercari, and I seen a couple pop up on eBay, but they generally go for a very high cost. It's just disappointing. It's a really fun game though. I like it. I enjoyed it, and I'm really happy to play this here remake. The next game up on the list is Tomb Raider Remastered. So, man, I was really excited to get this. When they first announced this, I was actually like, I don't know where I was. I completely missed the announcement. I did not know that they were making this game, or these three games, and I love the Tomb Raider franchise. It is one of my favorite franchises, one of my first favorite franchises back on the original PlayStation. I absolutely adored these games. I actually have, with me, I have the original PlayStation versions of the game. So I have Tomb Raider 1, I have Tomb Raider 2, I have Tomb Raider 3, the Collector's Edition variant, and I also have Tomb Raider The Last Revelation, which is, man, this one's definitely my favorite game in the collection. I believe I also have a copy of Tomb Raider Chronicles somewhere. But yeah, so this is definitely my favorite game. And yeah, so seeing these games remade on the current generation with current gen hardware, getting a really nice facelift. Now, this is only the first three games. I do believe that they plan on doing another collection for the games 4 through 6, which is The Last Revelation, Chronicles, and Angel of Darkness, which is also really cool. But This one initially launched only digital, yet again, just like the other two games here. And so finding a physical copy of it is much more difficult because when they did finally decide to do a physical copy, yet again, limited run games is who they went through. And yeah, just finding a physical copy of this, really hard, really, really difficult. Now, I will say it's slightly easier on the PlayStation 5 and the Switch yet again, but the Xbox Series X version, there was at one point where I couldn't find any copies of this, and I didn't think I would find one. And then one popped up on eBay, and it was about like, I believe $60, and I snatched it up. Um, I normally see PS5 copies go for, I don't know, I think it's around like $70 to $80, somewhere in there. Series X copies, I don't know. I hardly see these, so I don't even know what you would normally see this one go for. I saw this one for 60 and I grabbed it. But that's 3 video games added to the collection that are really rare games that in the current generation that you just really won't find anywhere else, and it's super disappointing to see that current gen games or even current gen games like that are rare and hard to come by, like because physical media unfortunately is just I feel like it's dying out. I don't know what the deal is. We're getting screwed, man. We're unfortunately getting screwed because digital media will never ever be a real replacement for physical, and it's sad to see that we're not getting as many physical releases nowadays as we used to. I mean, they recently did Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, right, was announced a couple of weeks ago, and was shadow dropped on Xbox Game Pass and on the Xbox Store and all other digital storefronts, which is great. But when it comes to physical copies, that's something that so they are doing physical for the PS5 version, but you have to buy it through PlayAsia. You can't just go on eBay. I mean, you can't just go on Amazon or walk into GameStop or something and buy a physical copy of it. And when it comes to the Xbox, there currently is no physical copy of it at all, which is just highly, highly disappointing. Like, I understand it's on Game Pass. I like Game Pass as a service, but just because it's on Game Pass does not mean that I don't want a physical copy. And unfortunately, we're seeing that a lot. Not even just with Xbox, but even on PlayStation. Some of these third-party games are just not launching physical copies, and it's really disappointing. But yeah, that was just a quick collection update, and I kind of wanted to go over the whole physical versus digital, and just the rare games, and how it's much harder as a collector. It's much harder to collect physical nowadays. But yep, so I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.